What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out on YouTube every single week. Going to begin with the Milan Derby. Inter rip AC Milan apart. And I want to start with the AC Milan side of this and then talk a little bit about Inter. But to me, the bigger story here is the way AC Milan fell apart defensively. And it was shaky from the very beginning, uncertainty, trying to play out of the back, mistakes, sloppiness, and then, of course, the goals start flooding in. And when you look at this AC Milan team in terms of trying to get back to the top of Serie A, trying to be part of the Scudetto conversation, there are two things that they were not good enough at last season. They did not score enough goals, and that was primarily because they didn't have enough help outside of Rafael Leao. And defensively, they had times, often against the top teams in the league, where they got ripped apart. If you compare what they did last season to what they did goals for, goals against when they won the league, they had to be better in both areas. I still would argue what they have done to their attack and the way they have revamped it, they're going to be at least within the margin of error attacking wise to be a factor in that conversation. Maybe not to win Serie A, but to be part of the title race. The question is, can they do enough defensively? Can they be consistent enough defensively? And I know Fikayo Tomori wasn't playing in this game, but he hasn't been the same player that he was when they won the title either. It's not like that is the reason this happened. This has been a trend over the past, season plus, that there just is not enough stability at the center back position, and your left back is maybe the best left back in the world, but not defensively minded. That is what is the part of this. If I'm an AC Milan fan, if I'm looking at AC Milan in terms of their title hopes, that's the part I am still very skeptical of. Is can they be good enough defensively? Because this was their first real test. I know they played Roma. That was a Roma team that was reeling, that is off to a poor start. When you are talking about the very best teams in this league, the Inters, the Juventuses, the Napolis, this was AC Milan's first test. And the results were that defense is nowhere near good enough. Now it's one game. Maybe this can change. I believe in that attack. A lot is going to have to happen for me to start believing in that defense. On the Inter side, obviously, very, very good performance overall. I will continue, and this game was a further confirmation of this. If you were asking me what I want to build my team around, give me Inter's defensive foundation. I know it kind of got lost a little bit there last season, but then they found it again and nearly won the Champions League. I would much rather have the issues on the attacking side than not be confident in what I'm getting defensively. And Inter may have attacking problems at sometimes. But if they can keep what they've got at the back, to me, they are the best challengers to Napoli right now. And then you throw in what Marcus Thuram did in this game and what you know you're going to get from Lautaro Martinez, and all of a sudden you have two big-time strikers, which is, of course, how they won the league with that Martinez-Lukaku pairing. And then you've got Henrik Mkhitaryan having a phenomenal game, competition in the midfield. There's a lot to like, even if the names don't necessarily scare you. There's a lot to like about where this team is at right now. And I was a believer that they had figured out and gotten back to the basics, and that There was nothing fluky about the end of last season. What they have done so far is proving that. They are that team again. But to me, the bigger story here is AC Milan trying to get themselves back and trying to keep pace with Inter, with Napoli, and there's still obviously plenty for them to figure out before that happens, based on what we saw in this game. The other two things I want to mention quickly in Europe before I get to Major League Soccer. Manchester City come from behind to beat West Ham. Nothing shocking about that. But the best player on the field in this game from start to finish was Jeremy Doku. I was a big believer a couple weeks ago that these questions about Manchester City's depth and their ability to bring difference makers off the bench when one or two players are not available was a real question. Maybe it doesn't hurt them too much in the Premier League. But just overall, comparing them to other Manchester City teams, that was a real concern for me. Grealish didn't play in this game. Obviously, De Bruyne didn't play in this game. Mateo Kovacic didn't play in this game. And yeah, the bench didn't look all that inspiring. But that was because you have this slew of injuries. And oh, by the way, Matheus Nunes was still there. Nathan Ake came off the bench to help see it out too. But if you can have Jeremy Doku giving you these kind of performances when called upon, or to be that guy off the bench who can go run at players, make life miserable for defenders, all kinds of creativity and ideas, just something to change a game, you're in great shape. And he looks settled in already. He knows what's expected of him. It'll be interesting to see how many starts he gets when this team is fully healthy, because Alvarez is playing great. Obviously, you've got De Bruyne. You would expect Grealish to still be in that starting lineup when he's healthy. But if this is the solution to the depth problem, Manchester City are going to be just fine. That's not some kind of real strong, substantial opinion there. But I did want to point it out because to me, those concerns are just gone at this point. You brought in two guys. One of them is already making a difference. You are already decimated by, in this game in particular, there were plenty of attacking players who were not available. City still had enough, still had an option on the bench. That's really all you can ask for. Jeremy Doku, incredibly impressive. That was my big takeaway there. And then wanted to at least acknowledge that Brighton handled Manchester United. It's not shocking considering where these two clubs are at. United's inability to build off of last season is confusing to me, but that's not something new to this game. So the one point I'll make is this. And I think I've brought this up before in some form. They are so reliant on Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford until somebody else really steps up and attack. Now, maybe that player is Rasmus Højlund, but we are not there yet, and you cannot just assume that's going to happen and happen immediately. That when you don't have Marcus Rashford in the form of his life like he was for most of last season, this is what you get. And again, the injuries are part of this. That back line is barely recognizable at this point because of all the players out. And I'm a believer in Mason Mount. I do think that's ultimately going to work. It hasn't been good so far, but he's also another piece that you would like to have. So this is by no means full strength United. But the general feel of this and the way it looks, I don't see changing unless Rasmus Højlund becomes one of the best strikers in the league right off the bat once he gets integrated. Because you can't be this reliant on two guys. And one of whom, in Rashford, who hasn't been the player he was last season throughout his career. He's obviously had really good stretches, overall very good performance and just career so far for United. But he stepped into something completely different last season. If he's not that player, you're in trouble. Because you look around you, the options Liverpool have, the options obviously Manchester City have, the options Arsenal have with Leandro Trossard coming in and getting them the points against Everton. The other teams you're competing with, when it comes to specifically the top three, trying to be more than just a team hoping to make the Champions League, they've got 3, 4, 5, 6 guys you can rely upon to kind of carry the attack at different points. United right now have 2. And I'll also throw this part in there. The Jadon Sancho situation is complicated. I don't really want to get into it right now in terms of right and wrong and what should happen. But if Ten Hag isn't going to use Sancho now, if he is fine leaving him out in the cold because of the clear disagreements and issues they have right now, if he's not going to use him now, when you don't have Antony, when you don't have Mason Greenwood, when you have all these injuries, and by the way, you're starting Champions League, and he decides he wants nothing to do with Sancho, I don't see Sancho coming back. Because if there's ever time to use him, it is right now. Not that he would have been the solution to the problem, because he hasn't been in his United career. But if there was going to be a time for him to turn into the player they thought they were getting, this would be it. And instead, he's been completely frozen out of the team and is training alone. So, it's a very long-winded way of saying kind of what I said last week. To me, this is just who United are. It's going to look better once they're healthier. But fundamentally, there is no next level to get to until they start finding a way to score goals other than Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford. MLS, real quickly, 2 notable things I want to point out and discuss. First, your biggest game of the weekend, Cincinnati come from 2 behind to get a draw against the Philadelphia Union in Chester. Second time Cincy have had one of these late 2-goal rallies in their past 3 games. Also came back to win at Atlanta. Yes, they lost at home to Orlando in the middle, but that's my point. It could have been so much worse, this 3-game stretch. And by the way, the teams next to them in the standings, with the exception of Orlando, have not capitalized on this stretch where Cincinnati haven't been great. But these 2 comebacks and the 4 points it got Cincinnati, to me, have clinched the Shield. I came into this game really thinking this might get interesting if they don't win this game. Because you just don't know. The Union still have a game in hand. Orlando are playing really well. The Revs are still there. Maybe somebody goes on a run and gives Cincinnati a real challenge here. Because they haven't been the same team over the past, couple months that they were at the beginning of the season. If they would have lost all 3 of these games, this is getting real interesting with teams 4 or 5 points back. Union would have had a game in hand. This could have gotten real tight real fast. But instead, they get the 3 points in Atlanta. They get the point in Philadelphia and prevent the Union from taking all 3 points. Now you've got a good cushion still. I just don't see anybody catching them. They've been the best team in the league from start to finish. They're deserving of this Supporters' Shield. Something catastrophic has to happen now. And so assuming this happens, when they lift that trophy and it is official, this 3-game stretch, the 2 comebacks, the points that they got from themselves, as well as the other teams around them's inability to capitalize, is going to be the reason they won this Shield. This could have gotten real dicey and real interesting, and Cincinnati said, nope. They did the hard work early by giving themselves such a lead, and now they're doing enough to make sure that I don't think it's going to be stressful at all for them. So, big week for Cincinnati. And then, of course, Inter Miami finally lose. They lose without Messi and Jordi Alba, who were both given the night off. This was bound to happen at some point, which is why I was getting frustrated with all of the hype. It's just hard to do this week in and week out. I am not concerned about this game in particular at all. This is what happens when a team that doesn't have depth takes away 2 of its most important players, goes to a difficult place to play against a team that is exceptionally motivated to beat you in particular because you're a local rival and because you are Messi's team. And that's also an Atlanta team trying to make sure they make the playoffs and are as high in the standings as possible. And it's a Miami team that has, not recently, but has some defensive vulnerabilities that a high powered Atlanta attack can expose. They just simply don't have the depth to do this without their best 11, and specifically Busquets, Alba, and Messi. And so I've been saying this consistently. Their playoff hopes are going to come down to the amount of games Messi plays and what they do in the games when he doesn't. Because Tata Martino has been very clear about this. They are going to prioritize the trophies that are easiest to win. I am 100% on board with that strategy. If they make the playoffs, great. But they are not going to run everybody into the ground trying to do so, and nor should they. Go win the ones that are easiest to achieve where you don't have to win a bunch of road games and hope that everything kind of goes your way. Go try and beat the Houston Dynamo in a one-off game. Go try and win League's Cup when everybody's kind of in this weird spot and Messi's just started and you don't have anything else to worry about. I am 100% supportive of this. This is the right call, and it very well may cost them a playoff spot because they had so much work to do. They don't have anything left to prove. They are an excellent MLS team. They're one of the best teams in the league. I do think they were getting overhyped a little bit. I tried to keep pushing back and saying that they caught some breaks and things kind of went their way. But also, you got, especially when Messi's on the field, you have to be almost perfect to beat them. That didn't happen this weekend. They kind of sacrificed this game. If they sacrifice too many, they're just going to mathematically eliminate themselves from the playoffs. And it's not that big of a deal. Because the priority is that Open Cup final. That's where it should be. That's how Tata Martino is handling this. It's a different story next season when you start with the clean slate. But Inter Miami finally do lose. It is without Messi and Jordi Alba. We'll see how these next couple weeks get handled. But that is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.